right, let me begin by saying it's a privilege, joy, and it's an honor that the God of Israel has given me to be able to be here with you today. And we're going to be doing 3 sessions. And so what I like to do often is when I come and teach, I like to build sessions upon each other. And so that's what we're going to be doing today. Now, I don't know if you got the program, but the program says this session is on the topic of understanding the coming collapse of the U.S. dollar. And so I'm going to share with you some things that I know about it, and then what I want to try to do is I want to tie to what's being said out there by non-religious people to the timing of the Bible and the timing of perhaps the reason why this is upon us fairly shortly. So one of the things we need to realize is just simple mathematics. And as of now, the federal debt that they admit to is $14 trillion. And in the last 3 years, it has grown by $5 trillion because we've been running close to $1.5 trillion deficit. And so I just saw this week that in this coming fiscal year that they are projecting again to be $1.5 trillion deficit. Basically, the budget deficit or the budget of the United States is $4 trillion. We collect about $2.5 trillion in taxes, so we're $1.5 trillion short. And if we have, just for the next 3 or 4 years, $1.5 trillion deficits, that means in 3 to 4 years, we will grow from $14 trillion in debt to $20 trillion in debt at our current pace, just in 3 or 4 years. And that debt has to be financed. And what if that debt, say 3 or 4 years going out, we're $20 trillion in debt now, what if we're able to finance it at 5%? Historically, that's a good rate. Then that means it will cost $1 trillion a year just in interest 3 to 4 years from now. And so right now, if we finance the present debt at 5%, that means we're paying $700 billion in interest. Now, if I remember correctly, last year, or maybe it was the year before, the interest that we paid for the year was about $400 billion. That's because at present, we're not paying 5% to finance our debt. It's being financed at 2 to 3% because much of the debt has been financed short term. And, you often hear in the news that, it's the foreigners that own all of our debt. It's China that owns all of our debt. And this past week, I was watching a financial program, and they listed the top 10 holders of U.S. debt. And I couldn't tell you who they were. I didn't know. So I had to see what they told. And actually, I was surprised by what they showed. And 25% of U.S. debt is held by foreigners. And of that debt, China is the biggest holder. of foreign holdings of U.S. debt. And China approximately has about $800 to $900 billion of the $14 trillion. So therefore, China only owns 7% of our debt. They only own 7% of our debt. And I was quite surprised about who is the number one holder of U.S. debt. And the number one holder of U.S. debt owns about 40% of the debt as of now. 40% of the debt. And you know who that might be? Huh? It is the U.S. Federal Reserve. The U.S. Federal Reserve is the number one financer of our debt. So you're taking, as of the last figures that got released, they have $5.6 trillion of the debt is through the U.S. Federal Reserve. So that is right now about, what is that? Seven times more? No. 5, 6, yeah. Basically 7 times as much as China. And so how is the U.S. Federal Reserve financing the debt? They just print it. And you know when you print money to pay for the debt, you just can only do that in a short-term basis because you're blowing up the air in the balloon, and the balloon is going to burst. And so, therefore, we are pretty much at the position right now that we cannot afford interest rates to be above 5%. Remember a number of years back, you could maybe get a CD for 6-7% sometimes? Well, that's because the discount rate was a little bit below that. Well, right now, the discount rate with the Federal Reserve charges as loans to other banks is only 0.25%. It's 0 to 0.25%. And so, you know that they have to keep interest rates above the inflation rate. So they tell us that the inflation rate is 1 to 3%. And so that's why interest rates are so low. But if we get something that causes inflation in prices like $150 a barrel oil, if something happens in the Middle East, we can't get oil through the Suez Canal, or we can't get oil through the Strait of Hormuz, and oil prices go up, which means everything that's tied to oil prices, like all of our shipping and everything like that, and it causes everything to go up, and all of a sudden we got 5-6% inflation. That means we have to have 7-8% interest rates. And in turning over our debt, the Federal Reserve, a lot of it is short-term debt. When they turn it over, and then turning it over, if they got to pay 5, 6, 7%, all of a sudden we can't even afford the interest. So we are really, one can argue even right now, this year, we are approaching the point of no return. And for those who may have put some hope in people like the Tea Party candidates and things like that, who are advocating fiscal responsibility, if you just take mathematically what they got to do to get things balanced, it's ugly. I mean, if they commit to do what they say they want to do, it's ugly, because so much of the current spending is on social programs. You take social programs and you take defense spending and you take interest. That's the huge chunk of the federal debt. And so, right now they're talking about, getting rid of earmarks and things like that. Well, that's such a small percentage, it doesn't even put a dent in things. So if they're going to change course, they almost have to change course right away. And if they are really serious about changing courses, the people will vote them out. The same ones that voted them in will vote them out. Because they don't like deficits, but they don't like cutting spending either. And so we have a problem. So much of the ministry that the God of Israel has given me is to be a watchman. And in Jeremiah, in chapter 31, in verse 6, it says, "There shall be a day that the watchman upon Mount Ephraim will cry, 'Arise and let us go up to Zion.'" And I'm going to be sharing a message in the afternoon after we have our lunch on "Let us go up to Zion." And so the God of Israel has also stated in Isaiah in chapter 62 that, verse 1, "For Zion's sake will I not hold my peace, and for Jerusalem's sake I will not rest, until the righteousness thereof goes forth as brightness, and salvation as a lamp that burns." Verse 6, "I've set watchmen on your walls, O Jerusalem, which shall never hold their peace day nor night. You that make mention of the Lord, keep not silent, give him no rest till he establish, until he make Jerusalem a praise in the earth." And then, this is the calling of a watchman in Ezekiel chapter 33, verses 1 through 7. It says, "The word of Yahweh came unto me, saying, Son of man, speak to the children of your people, and say to them, When I bring the sword upon a land, if the people of the land take a man of their coast and set him for their watchman, if when he sees the sword come upon the land, he blow the shofar and warn the people, then whosoever hears the sound of the shofar and takes not warning, if the sword come and take him away, his blood shall be upon his own head. He heard the sound of the shofar and took not warning, his blood shall be upon him. But he that takes warning shall deliver his soul. But if the watchman see the sword come and does not blow the shofar, and the people are not warned, and if the sword come and take any person from among them, he is taken away in his iniquity, but his blood will I require at the watchman's hand. So you, O son of man, I have set you a watchman unto the house of Israel. Therefore you shall hear the word at my mouth, and warn them from me." And so, in addition to having a desire in my heart to study and know the Bible as well as I could try to pursue learning the Bible, growing up, even in my teenage years, my dad would make me read the Wall Street Journal. And I was reading the Wall Street Journal in 8th and 9th grade study hall in school. And so from doing that, I started, reading what was contained in there. So it started talking about economics and things. And so I started following economics and try to follow the things that they were saying. So based upon that, I feel as though I got the necessary understanding of how economics works, that I'm able to take the economic numbers that they give us all the time on television and elsewhere, and have a good perspective and have a good understanding as to what those economic numbers mean. And most people aren't trained in understanding macroeconomics, and so they end up believing either what they're told or perhaps what they want to believe. So the first thing is, if you just take the raw numbers of our federal debt, we are in trouble. And the next thing I'd like to do is I'd just like to be a reporter and share with you what I have heard. And I'm in full-time ministry, and part of what I do at home, since I don't have television, by choice, I don't have television, And so what I do have, and I spend all my time when I'm at home, when I'm not traveling and speaking, is at the computer. And I'm checking the news morning, afternoon, and night. I'm checking what's going on in Israel. I'm checking what's going on in the economy. I'm seeing what's going on with the possibility of war developments in the Middle East. And so in doing that, I just like to keep an ear out and have an idea of what's going on. And because that's what I'm doing for myself personally, and I enjoy doing that because I like knowing what's going on a mostly weekly basis, I put out something that is becoming quite popular, and it seems everywhere I go, somebody comes up to me and says, I'm listening to your weekly prophetic news update, and I really enjoy it. So someone last night came up to me and said it as well. And so it's famously or infamously called the 5-minute update. And the reason why it's called a 5-minute update, in case you've either heard about it and wondered why it's called a 5-minute update, or you haven't heard about it, is that one day, this is, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years ago, I was at my congregation, and there was some news event that was going on in Israel, and I said, I want to share this with you guys. And we're also connected on the internet to people on Talk, and I really wanted to share with the people on Talk. But you know, we had a service to do and teachings for the service and everything. And so I came up and I said, no, this won't take very long. It'll only take 5 minutes, but this is really important. I need to show it to you. And so I read it, but I was thinking, well, they may not understand some of this stuff because it has to do with politics in Israel and the meaning of it, or maybe the prophetic significance. So first I took a little bit of time to explain, the background of what the words of the article was about. And basically by the time I did that and maybe shared a little bit of scriptures of why I'm reading it and how it pertains to the end of days, all of a sudden it was 45 minutes or an hour. So they was making fun of me on Talk and saying, yeah, you said it was 5 minutes and here it is an hour later. And so the next week I had something else I wanted to share. And so I thought, what am I going to, I know what I'll do. I'll just call it a 5-minute update since you made fun of it. So I feel good at the moment, but I heard my dad say as I was growing up, one of the many sayings he has lots of sayings, confession is good for the soul. So if that's the case, because of my love and my desire for the 5-minute update, and I had something this week that I wanted to share with people who follow the 5-minute update, I stayed up all night last night. But you got a 5-minute update though, and I'm awake. My problem would have been if I'd have got 2 hours of sleep, then I wouldn't have been able to walk. But if you prevent, you don't go to sleep, then you can be awake. Yeah. Anyhow, so a part of what I shared in this week's 5-minute update is a testimony that came from Rick Wiles' website, which is truenews.com, trunews.com. And on his January the 14th program, he had some guests on there that shared about the economy, but shared about things. 2 people shared about what they heard from insiders, the people who are actually planning and doing certain things. And I like it. I like getting to the point. I try when I speak to try to get to the point, and I like when I'm hearing something from somebody that they get to the point. And so, the interview was an hour long, but it didn't take, and you didn't have to listen to the hour to get all of the information. And so I decided to take the program and go in and edit it so that what you just hear is just the point. And so in doing that, I edited out like 35 minutes of the hour program. But it takes a long time to edit because you got to listen and edit and listen. So you've listened to the thing about 5 times because you got to keep re-listening. So that's what took so long. But if y'all can get something out of it, then it was worth it. But anyhow, I want to share what that testimony is, but I want to share another testimony as well. There's this individual by the name of Pastor Lindsey Williams, and I had never heard of him till 2008. But his testimony is, and he's in his 70s now, is that he was a chaplain in the Alaska pipeline in the 1970s. And he was asked to sit in on the meetings of the oil executives that ran the Alaskan pipeline. And he was able to sit in on their meetings over a 3-year period. And by attending those meetings, he was able to understand in practical terms that what they discussed in those meetings and what they planned, like the direction of oil prices and things like that, that whatever they decided to do in the meeting, that's what happened in real life. And if you really have a free market, then you can't control what happens in real life because the market controls it. And that and so many other things that they discussed, he saw that they happened in real life. So he came to understand that they had the power to control that whatever decisions they made happened. And so he would take some of the things that he heard, and he couldn't keep it to himself, and he'd go out and share it to others. And I don't know how much he did or all the details that he did. I just know that he said one time back then that he was saying some stuff that they didn't want him to say. And so he came to him. They came to him and they said, hey, if you know what's best for you, you shouldn't say this, that, and the other. So he knew what was best for him, so he quit saying this, that, and the other. But anyhow, that was back in the 70s. And he had made friendship with several of the oil executives during that time. But then he had written a book recently. I never read it, but it's called The Energy Non-Crisis. And part of what he was trying to say in there is we have plenty of oil in the world, and there really isn't a crisis. It's just contrived and manipulated. He gave his evidence and this and that. So I guess there was too many people that was reading the book, and he was influencing too many people. Plus he had the book and things like that on his website. So it was in the summer of 2008 when he gets a call from one of these oil executives that he hadn't spoken to for 25 years. And the oil executive said, Lindsey, once again, this time you've gone too far. You said such and such in the book, and you said such and such on the website, and we don't want you to say such and such. And if you know what's best for you, then you will remove those things. And so Lindsey said he agreed right away. He took his website down. He only had 500 of the books left, and he didn't reprint the book. And so once he told him that he would do what they wanted him to do, he decided he'd be friendly with the gentleman that called him. And he said, so how's your family, and what's going on? And this was the summer of 2008. Oil had just hit $147 a barrel. And he said, well, what can I expect to be happening in the world in the next 12 months? And he said, well, Lindsey, let me tell you. He said, oil's going down to $50 a barrel. And Lindsey was in shock. It's 147. You know, we're paying nearly $4. And he says, the price that you're going to pay at the pump is going to go from $4 down to $2. And Lindsey, from experience and being with these guys in the past, knew that if they said that that's what they were going to do, that's what they were going to do. So he immediately got on radio stations and started telling this was going to happen. Of course, many people thought he was nuts. But it was only 4 months later that oil dropped from $147, and it actually, for a couple weeks, got as low as $35. And then, I don't know what it was here out in Oregon, but in Ohio, it dropped from nearly $4 a gallon. It got to as low as about $1.75. And I think that was just like right before the Obama got elected. It was about $1.75. And he said it's going to stay between $50 and $70 a barrel for about 2.5 years. And after that time, it'll be raised. Well, guess what? 2.5 years is now up. And he said once it drops to $50 a barrel and you're paying $2 a gallon at the pump, enjoy it for a couple years because it's going to stay there. But after a couple years, it's going back up. And so Lindsay maintained contact with this person from that phone call in the summer of '08, clear up through a month or two ago. And so Lindsay would call him from time to time and ask him about what's going on with policies of the U.S. government and other things. He had originally told Lindsay that the dollar was going to crash in the summer of '09. But he told him that because the bailout package got passed, that they extended their timeline. And the latest thing that he told him which was at the end of October, that's October of 2010, is he said somewhere in 6 to 9 month time frame that oil is going to $150 to $200 a barrel, and you're going to be ending up paying $5 a gallon or more in gas. And he said that by the end of 2012, the dollar will be dead. And when he had spoken with him a little bit later on than that, I think it was November into December, he said, in 3 to 5 months, there'll be a crisis in the Middle East. Well, we are now at the end of 3 months. And what has happened now is Lebanon and Egypt has engaged in problems. And he also told him in 2008, because Bush was all the time talking about Iran, and so Lindsay asked him about Iran, and he laughed at him and he said, nothing's going to happen with Iran. But then a few months back, he said that they now want a crisis in the Middle East. They now want perhaps war in the Middle East for 2011. And so this individual that was giving him this information, this oil executive, Lindsay, of course, wasn't allowed to mention his name. But in 2010, he had contracted cancer. And I don't know whether it was in November or December. I don't remember what Lindsay said. But he ended up dying from his cancer. And so once he died, Lindsay released his name, and the person that was giving him this information was named Kenneth Fromm, F-R-O-M-M, and he was a big executive for Atlantic Richfield. But there's one other executive now that Lindsay's been friends with and he's been communicating with about things, and this is he's living, so you don't have his name, but we've been told that he is an ex-CEO of one of the top 3 oil companies. And so that's that. That's what Lindsay's been reporting the last couple of years, and this is not from religious people and someone gave me a prophecy today. This is from secular sources that supposedly control things out there in the U.S. economy, things in the U.S. government, and they plan the direction and things are going to happen. And so now we're going to get to what I put on the 5-minute update this week, which was this radio interview of January the 14th on True News. And Rick Wiles interviewed 3 individuals, and 2 of the individuals have Christian ministries, and one is a Christian business person. And the one individual that has a Christian ministry, actually his website is watchmanscry.com. His name's Nathan. And he called Rick Wiles about December the 16th, if I remember, from listening to it last night, and said a friend of his personally spoke with an individual of the global elite and has power, and communicated that the dollar was going to collapse this year in 2011. So Nathan believed his friend, but he decided if he could check out the source that his friend was saying that they personally talked to. And so Nathan said he just thought he'd give it a try and send out an email to this person, and he was shocked that they replied back and basically affirmed what the individual told his friend and said, look at this website and that website where I said this and I said that and things like that. And so from the email, Nathan said he was able to affirm what his friend told him by himself speaking to the individual. And then a day or two later, this Christian business person called Rick Wiles, and he said he was just in a business meeting, and he had spoken to someone that's got a lot of money in business circles, and we probably would know who he was if his name was given, but of course his name wasn't given. This individual said the same thing, that the dollar was going to collapse in 2010, and also stated for the last 18 months work has been done traveling to other nations, working with other nations to ultimately begin the process to establish a world currency and to bring in a world currency. And so I believe it wasn't Mr. Frum, but it was this other oil executive who had phoned Lindsay after Mr. Frum died, which was just a couple months ago, and said, would you, he volunteered, would you like for me to share with you some things that Mr. Frum was sharing with you since he's not here anymore? And Lindsay said, sure. So that's when Lindsay was told, and this was just in the last couple months, that the euro is going to collapse first. And then 2 to 3 weeks after the euro collapses, then the dollar will collapse. And a couple years ago, Mr. Frum told Lindsay Williams, let me give you a sign that what I'm telling you is on course. I'll give you a sign. I'll give you something to watch for. When you see this, you know that what I'm telling you is on course. He says, watch the price of oil and watch the price of gasoline at the pump. When it begins to go up, that means we are on schedule and we are in the process of executing our plan.